Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Bosch Legacy Season 2, Episode 5. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, let's start off with Maddie's side of things. Obviously, this is her first official day as a part of crew, which I just went along with the acronym, but I didn't know what it actually stood for, but we learned this episode, Crime Reduction Unit. So they're working Hollywood, and they're trying to, hit these places where, any type of smaller crime can be mitigated or reduced heavily. They pretend to be dressed in civilian clothing. I mean, to be fair, they're naturally in civilian clothing just because that's what the job calls for. But they're meant to kind of help with any type of situation, any robbery, any type of situations that end up popping off in very touristy areas where something's more likely to happen, like on a scam or robbery type of lane. And so Maddie and Vasquez are the ones that are kind of on the ground, and they do see this guy in a black hoodie. I was wondering if that storyline was going to develop into something bigger. Once again, it's one of those things of it pushes Maddie's story forward, but whether it's going to have major overarching plot relevance on its own, who knows? But it's relevant to Maddie's story and her progression, because when it came time to go after the guy, Maddie went after the guy pretty hard. I figured, I don't know if Maddie saw him do this or not, but we as the audience saw, right when they were being chased down, the other guy got caught, but Maddie's guy, he was able to ditch the gun. So it's I don't know if she saw him ditch the gun. We saw it fly underneath the car. So it could turn into a plot relevant thing of when he got arrested, they never found the gun because he tossed it. They didn't really make a point of it this episode, so it could easily be a thing of, they found the gun. Despite him trying to ditch it in the process of running. Because I'm about to say, if it never got found, maybe someone else picks it up and that becomes a problem later on type of situation. But like I said, they didn't make a point of we didn't find the gun on the guy. Which I feel like that would have been relevant if that was the case. So most likely either Maddie saw him dispose of the gun, or they checked the general area of where he was running and ultimately found the gun. So either way. But Maddie was super aggro. Even I was kind of a little because I was scared the entire time. The moment Maddie drew her gun, which, she's in the right to, because the guy's got a weapon, but also is telling him to freeze. But I was kind of scared that this would turn into a worse situation than it did. She roughed him up, which is still a big no-no, but it could have been so much worse. But luckily, Vasquez is the one that caught it, seeing okay, the guy was arrested. You were kind of really rough with him. You're slapping him around. And so she invited Maddie over to her house. It's come, have dinner at my mom's place. That way, we can all unwind. Maddie didn't read too much into that, but as the audience, you're Vasquez wants an opportunity to talk to her in a non-professional sense. And they're hanging out, and it's right, we learn about Vasquez, her upbringing, her family, the fact that she's got 4 sisters. So, but, it's just kind of all right. And then later on, it leans into, okay, you were pretty rough with that guy. She's no, he was resisting. It's yeah, but he was resisting, or at least putting having an issue with the way you were you were pretty rough with him when you were arresting him, and he slapped him after you'd already put the cuffs on him. And it's even Maddie recognized right, I had this rage in me. She's lie down, motherfucker. I don't know where it came from. It's we do that trauma hasn't gone away. That anger and that pain, you went through something traumatic, and I don't think you've fully dealt with it and processed all of it. I'm not saying writing her victim impact note thing, if that's going to actually help. Bosch believes it does, and I think maybe it will, but because it will help her with her feelings, but we don't know if she's really bothered. She kind of pulled away from that, her and Rico were going to go get pancakes or something like that. So she's probably still hasn't done it, and once again, we don't know when Doc Wilder's we know what's coming up, but we still don't know when in the season it might happen. But Vasquez was kind of right, you want to kind of get that under control, because she was no, but Maddie said, no, I have it in control, because it's that could wild out and spread out into something much, much worse. But what Vasquez's words does resonate with Maddie, because even she was wow, did I really kind of lose my shit back there? And you see, I don't know if that's her writing up a statement about or a report on what went down that day, but she does have this look on her face, because she had a conversation with Bosch earlier in the episode about like the whole crew situation of like, all right, it's her first day, and obviously this is before, that was like her second day, and that was so like, but she talked to Bosch before like the second day where the incident went down, but he was like, yeah, I would have liked you to have talked to me about it, and it's like, well, what would you have said? He's like, I would have been like, congratulations. And I also would have been like, are you sure you're ready? And she's like, see, I wanted to avoid that, because it's like, act first, apologize later. And he's like, I never told you that. She's like, you told me by living that example. And even he's like, yeah, you got me there. It's like, even he can't like deny. It's like, yeah, that is kind of me. It's one of those things of do as I say, not as I do. But it's also like, man, it's hard to really tell Maddie. Like when my professional career has been a certain way, and it's like Maddie's kind of adopted that same philosophy. It's like, it's kind of hypocritical for me to kind of call her out. So, but I think it is something to reflect on. I think on Maddie's part, I think it is going to be something she would like I said, her sitting there, like writing something up. Like I said, I guess it's the report, but I mean, I'd assume you would have done that at the office, so it might have been something else, but maybe you could do that at home too, but it does seem like it did give her something to think about, and probably even with her dad's words of like, are you actually ready? And because she'd even told Edgewood like, oh, can I think about it? But then like Edgewood was like, oh, I thought you said she was like all about this. And Maddie was like, yeah, I am. She's so desperate for a change to move, to turn it to the next chapter, to put this all behind her. She hasn't once again processed and really dealt with everything properly, And once again, I'm no psychologist, so I'm sure there are better, proper channels and ways to handle this that I'm not. Well, like I said, I think Bosch's means of getting her to try and do her victim report was probably like her victim impact statement. That I think that is a stepping stone in the right direction. So we'll wait to see where things go on that front, whether or not that rage that Maddie's feeling, if we see that kind of escalate more and more over the course of the season or going forward, we'll have to see. We also got introduced to this interesting side plot with Mo this episode. It's kind of like a hackers gathering type of situation. He runs into his buddies and he meets a lady there. And I was excited. I was like, oh, it's Jessica Camacho. I was like, oh, that's so dope. I'm trying to remember the last thing I saw her in. I was like, I feel like it was something within the past year or so that I saw her in something. I was also sitting there thinking, I was trying to remember, I was like, was Sleepy Hollow the first thing I ever saw her in? Sleepy Hollow, the TV show? Because I was trying to remember if it was that or The Flash. I want to say timeline-wise, she was in Sleepy Hollow before she was in The Flash. So I think that was the case at the timeline-wise. Matches up. But yeah, I was like so excited to see her. I was like, oh, that's so dope. But anyway, I'm curious to see what that storyline ends up being. It's a little bit of a flirtatious storyline for Mo. Someone he's interested in. Even like she's a podcaster and don't really know much about her. Only that her relationship situation is complicated. So you're like, all right, there's some threads they're setting up there. And I'm not sure if that's just going to be a Mo. Once again, there's hard to say what storylines are just going to be isolated as progression for another person's story. Or is this isolated to their story? So is that just going to stay a Mo thing? And it's going to be a part of his character development, or does that also tie into some overarching stuff? Like, will she tie into the main plot or some other storylines or weave with that? That's the big thing. But it's interesting because I feel like Mo hasn't really had any stories of his own. Like his storylines are always like, oh, helping out Bosch. Like his story is intertwined in that way, and not. I mean, at least even in the because I'd still say, like, yes, Bosch was connected to the Carl Rogers thing, but it still was its own, thread for Chandler. So, like, but I guess, you see what I mean? So, like, people do have, like, their own stories. And obviously Bosch and Chandler are connected by the FBI investigation into the whole Rogers situation of it all. So, but it's like, I don't feel like Mo's kind of had his own thing until, like, potentially this. And I'm just curious to see how that plays out in the overarching story. But getting into the meat and potatoes of the episode, we had Harry checking out the house that Lexi, obviously like her and her husband Vince's house, and he's checking out the place, and then ultimately, sadly, Vince was there and he knows exactly who Bosch is, and it's like, oh, who are you here like checking it out for? And it's like defense. It's like they're gonna hold that against Bosch. I mean, to be fair, Bosch was never the biggest fan of defense lawyers. To be fair, despite their relationship being the rocky road that it's always been, him and Chandler are on much better terms, especially like after last. I mean, they definitely had a better relationship going forward post, what was that, season 5 or 6, but like especially after last season, like especially because Harry goes by his own code. Like the only reason why he's helping Chandler is like, well, I'll look into it. Oh, well, we're also bound by this whole FBI investigation, so there's that. But then there's also like, well, I believe this David dude had nothing to do with Lexi's murder, so I'm all about finding the right person, making sure justice is actually served, and the wrong guy isn't taking a fall for it. Because if the wrong guy takes the fall for it, that leaves the real killer out there to either continue doing what they're doing or get away. Like, and once again, true justice isn't served. But Vince was not a fan of. Once again, it's just Harry is on that same side of, hey, I don't like defense lawyers either, but Vince was kind of upset by Harry, like, oh, here you are, like, under false pretense. It's like, well, would that be, like, would the situation, I mean, there's only so much information and so much investigating you can really do as a private investigator, so you have to get, creative with it, because a badge, a legitimate cop badge, gets you a lot further than an FBI, than a private investigator badge. So he probably could have came there in a more like investigative sense, but it's like, once again, all Vince heard was, you're there with the defense, you're hearing the defense, you're going to try and get that guy who murdered my wife off, which makes me wonder, does Vince have, I mean, it could just easily be a situation of maybe he has nothing to do with this, but it feels like, I mean, once again, you start getting to that statistic of it all. Well, to be fair, they did say, like, oh, he's got an alibi. Doesn't mean he isn't involved, but it is a thing of, well, you typically in a situation, the go-to is the husband or boyfriend or significant other. But in this particular case, it's like, once again, they made it pretty clear in episode, was it 3? Yeah, I think it was like episode 3. They were like, yeah, he has a rock solid alibi. But once again, someone else could have been responsible for it, and he could have like co-signed it, type of, so he could be like involved in that way and not like directly involved. But either way, Vince really jumped down Bosch's throat, and obviously even later on, those cops, those detectives are like, hey, because I thought it was, well, I was about to say, I have to correct myself because I was about to say something wrong. I was about to say, like, he meets those detectives who are looking at Alexi's case, but I was like, but isn't that Pierce and Vega's case? But I'm like, no, Pierce and Vega's case is James Allen. He's their case. Yes, there's connection, but they're working the James Allen case as well as like these other potential victims that are in the male sex work line of VIDS. So. But yeah, the detectives working Lexi's case are friends and colleagues, and they're like, yeah, because we respect who you used to be. It's like, yeah, like, mother effers, just because I'm a private detective and I'm working with Chandler in this particular case does not mean I've kind of lost touch with who I am. Like, my record should stand up and up, but like, everyone's like trashing Bosch's name. It's them, the other cops who were deeply involved in this, which I think is so hypocritical. They're like, oh, he's going dark side. Motherfuckers, you doing some shady shit, you're calling him going dark side? Go fuck yourselves. Like, the pot, excuse me? So that was like what I thought was so interesting. But I was like, yeah, everyone's throwing shade Bosch's way because of him working with Chandler, which is such horseshit, especially when the guy is in fact innocent. So, especially if we find out Vince has something to do with this, it makes you even more of a piece of shit for like, but you're covering your bases and stuff like that. Because Bosch did notice that Lexi didn't have a watch around her hand, and he wondered like, oh, was there something like, did the killer take it? But why would they take that and not her ring? Which Vince is like, yeah, it's being repaired, and it's like, was it being repaired? Is that him lying and covering his bases? That makes me go like, maybe there might be something a little bit more to Vince having something to do with this. Especially when we get introduced, because I'll jump ahead a little bit. We know that those dirty cops they rob people and they hawk their stuff. So, and we also get introduced to the people who pawn off and sell their stuff. They sell stuff to. So maybe that was actually payment for Lexi or something. Because I didn't even think about that until just now. It's like, right, we got those dealers who deal with like watches and jewelry, and Lexi just happens to, because that's the thing, like, it does seem like it probably might have gotten taken off her arm during the whole thing. So, I don't know. Like, it definitely smells like BS. So now sitting here talking about it more and more, like, during this recording makes me feel more and more likely, like, Vince does have something to do with this. What is happening, whether he's being forced to or whether he did it willingly, like, maybe he found out that his wife was cheating on him and he wanted her to die or something. Because not unless we end up finding out there is an escort situation going on here where, I mean, we saw everything with David and James, and we've seen that. Because typically they rob people because of, like, they get escorts to hook them up. And it's like, well, we see they have escorts across the board. They've got lady escorts like that guy they framed in, like, episode 3 and blackmailed. Plus, we know they used James to go after David. So now whether that was just an unrelated thing and that just... Because David was James' boyfriend, as that guy at the hotel kind of put it. So I don't know if it was a situation of their relationship predate that whole ordeal, or whether David was a long-term mark, or whether it's just a thing of, like, yeah, James and David just naturally had a relationship, and then, like, the cops came to James and was like, yo, we need you to screw this guy over or rob him. It might have been a thing of, I was initially supposed to get close to him and rob him, but, like, you got too close to the mark type of situation. You actually fell in love. Maybe that's the deal. But my point while I was going on that whole diatribe, like, what if Lexi had, like, a male suitor, like, in a more, sex worker occupation that worked with them, and maybe Vince found out. There's so many layers to that, and I'm like, I'm rambling on, but I'm just like, it just feels like there's something there. We just can't quite piece it together, but it does feel like there's something there. The dirty cops in particular, they are tracking Bosch because they end up putting a tracker on his car. So he'll find it eventually, but the question is, what's going to cause him to? Because what I think is interesting is they ended up going to the hotel, couldn't find anything. There was a missing picture, so Chandler was like, could it be like the wiring from a picture? Could have been what strangled James, but they don't have enough concrete evidence. Then they go to the cemetery, which the cemetery has there's a Paramount water tower, and it's like, oh, it looks at everything. You get a little bit of a view of the hotel/motel, and they have enough. Well, it's a starting point. It's not conclusive enough, but it seems like there was a white van that showed up around the time David claimed to be with James, and he left like 2 hours later, and it wasn't in the direction of where he would have gone if he was going to Lexi's. So it seems like it's enough for Bosch to be like, oh yeah, he definitely didn't do it, but that in court they're going to need something more definitive, because you can't make out that I mean, it's a small corner of the video, and not enough enhancing. There's not enough enhancing able to, like, really give you a good enough look and be able to definitively prove it, so they're going to need something else. I was hoping that footage would allow them to see, like, all they have to do is scrub through it and see, like, oh, while you're there, those cops were at the cemetery too. Because the camera gives you a better look at the overview of the cemetery, since they were there at the same time. That could be the connective tissue, because Chandler did go like, yeah, when I ran into those cops, I felt like I've met them before. Like, and she talks about, like, felt like they were watching me at the bar, keeping an eye on me. And Bosch is like, well, trust your gut. She's like, yeah, and I feel like they messed with with David's file. And he's like I told you, trust your gut. So he is giving her co-signing, being like, all right, be sure to check this out. So that's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens there. But I feel like that surveillance footage from that water tower will be relevant in proving, like, oh, these cops are following you. And that might click in Bosch's mind, like, wait, why are they there? Why are they maybe even finding out that they followed you to other locations, and then find out about the tracker. He'll most likely keep the tracker on, but he'll most likely switch vehicles just to keep them off his trail type of situation. Because I think that's, stuff that's happened in the series before. I am curious, when him and Chandler had to separately go to court, was that about stuff related to the Carl Rogers stuff, or like what that was about. Because we never saw what Chandler was in there for, nor did we see what Bosch went there for. But what I thought was interesting, he ran into Anderson. I was like, yo! I was just thinking about him like in a previous episode or something, being like, oh, I wonder, is Anderson going to pop up? And lo and behold, there he is. I was like, there you go, you bastard. I'm sure Bosch's relationship with him isn't going to be as cantankerous as it was in the past. I'm trying to remember, did he pop up in season 1 at all? Because I feel like the last time I think he popped up might have been season 7. I'm fairly certain he was in season 7, but I don't remember if he was in the first season of Bosch Legacy or not. I don't remember off the top of my head. Maybe he was. But he's the one that kind of gave Bosch the heads up. I mean, unbeknownst to him, but it's like, yeah, that the FBI came and snatched up the Simon Wakefield case, which now him and Chandler are being like, all right, because the feds are grabbing that up, tell me everything that, like, once again, we got to run through all the details of when you went to Wakefield's place and took his phone and stuff, because we need to know, like, whatever details you might remember that might be an opening for the FBI to come after us, because they're still working Matthew, and Chandler is being very careful, like, okay, I know what I'm doing, and because it's like, oh, bring me these files. Oh, I've shredded this stuff. And he brings not only like the digital copy of all these files, but even the shredded stuff that was connected. And it's like, whatever was shredded was probably, I'm curious, is it like, okay, we're keeping this up, and it's like all that shredded stuff is complete and other BS that's unrelated that we want them to waste their time on. Because you figured she probably wasn't going to go, like, because it's like, okay, this flash drive he's telling me to plug in. Maybe I should check in with Mo to make sure there ain't some BS related to this. But I don't know. Because I love every time he walks away from the room, you could just see her staring at him. I'm like, you mother effer. Like, you can tell she's so pissed. Matthew doesn't seem like he doesn't want it. He's not doing this willingly. It's still the thing of, to protect himself, self-preservation, he's screwing over Chandler and everything. Those FBI agents are, like, rabid dogs about this, because they end up talking to I'm assuming with the context of everything, he was there at the pipeline explosion, because he even says, like, he never saw Crates and Barrel, he never saw Mo, but he saw Bosch. He's like, yeah, this is the guy that looked at me and said boom. So now they've tied Bosch to the pipeline blowing up. So once again, I don't know why they're so... Once again, I guess it's just like, it is purely the situation of like, right, you crossed the line, you've done something bad, and once again, they're like, oh, she fed Carl Rogers to the Russians. It's like, yeah, even if she... I mean, I'm sure there is a... I don't know what that would legally fall under. Because once again, wasn't her plan I thought her plan was to kill him, and the Russians just happened to show up and they just happened to kill. Like, I don't think she served him up to the Russians, but I mean, maybe she did, and I'm just not remembering. Because I remember, like, she was hiding out when she found out the Russians were there. She just kind of hid. Like I said, I don't think I think she set out to kill him herself, and just luckily the Russians killed him first, so she didn't have to do it. So it's not like she served him up to the Russians. It just happened to work out like that, if I remember correctly. But once again, could be misremembering. But the FBI is coming after her in particular like that, which I'm like I said, I guess it's like an abuse of power and justice, and it's like, right, when these injustices, we got to come after you, but not less. Carl was connected to some case that they were working on, and it's like his death screwed things up. Because once again, they're not going after the Russians because it doesn't fall into their jurisdiction, but going after Chandler, Bosch, and Crates and Barrel, and Mo falls under their jurisdiction with what they're being accused of. So we'll have to wait to see where that also takes us going forward. It's definitely going to be interesting to see where that ends up taking us, but really, that's all I wanted to talk about. We'll ultimately have to wait to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good